This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
A Hamas activist was martyred and 2 others were injured in a car bomb explosion in the city of Gaza. According to Hamas spokesman Mr. Sami Abu Zuhri, the name of the victim is Hamza Mihareb, a member of the Izdin Brigades, the military wing for Hamas. Mr. Abu Zuhri confirmed that the victim was assassinated in an Israeli airstrike. However, the Israeli army denied responsibility for the incident. This news came as the standoff between Israel and the Palestinians continues to escalate in the aftermath of the abduction of an Israeli soldier by Palestinian activists in the Gaza Strip. This incident took place just hundreds of meters away from the office of the Palestinian Prime Minister, Ismail Haniyeh, and the headquarters of Mahmoud Abbas's residence in Gaza. According to Hamas and Fatah officials, all Palestinian blocs, with the exception of Islamic Jihad, agreed on all articles of the prisoner's document that implicitly recognizes Israel. The agreement was reached after some amendments were added to the document. This news came amidst preparations by local residents in the Gaza Strip for a possible Israeli military incursion. The Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert threatened that Israel will carry out a wide-scale military operation in Gaza if the abducted Israeli soldier is not released. The deadline, which was set by the Israeli Governing Council for the release of the soldier, is about to run out. It was a happy ending. This is what Palestinians are saying in light of an agreement on the prisoner's document, which has become known as the Document of National Reconciliation. The High Follow-Up Committee for the National and Islamic blocs announced the end of the National Reconciliation Conference, confirming that all parties signed the new amended document. The document will be presented to President Mahmoud Abbas, who is expected to meet with his Prime Minister Ismail Haniyeh to officially announce the outcome of the agreement.
نستطيع أن نزف للشعب الفلسطيني بشرى الاتفاق على وثيقة الأسرى.
We would like to congratulate the Palestinian people on the success of the prisoner's document, or the Palestinian National Reconciliation document. After a profound and lengthy meeting, all articles of the document have been approved and signed.
وثيقة بكافة بنودها بعد حوار معمق وطويل.
This agreement will enhance the Palestinian position, especially in light of Israeli threats of a possible wide-scale military incursion in the Gaza Strip in the aftermath of the abduction of an Israeli soldier. The Palestinian resistance and armed factions were put on high alert to counter any possible Israeli attack. Hundreds of armed men were deployed in city streets and camp alleys. Meanwhile, Palestinian bulldozers dumped piles of dirt in main city streets to shield the Gaza Strip and hamper Israeli military vehicles from reaching their targets in the event of an incursion.
We are ready to do anything. We are ready to sacrifice our soul and blood. It is all downhill from here. Israel is our enemy, and what do you expect from the enemy? We expect the worst from the enemy.
In a press conference, Palestinian prisoners' families called on the kidnappers of the Israeli soldier to spare his life and treat him humanely. But they did ask his captors not to release him without anything in return.
First, the Israeli prisoner of war must be treated humanely and in accordance with Islamic laws. Second, we call on our brothers from the resistance movement not to release the Israeli POW unless all Palestinian POWs in Israeli jails are freed and without any exception.
Meanwhile, the Palestinian Ministry of Health confirmed that it is ready for any emergency situation in case of an incursion. It also appealed to local residents not to crowd into hospitals or stand in the way of emergency teams, which may hamper their efforts of providing medical attention. Palestinians' joy in the aftermath of the national agreement signed by all Palestinian blocs, with the exception of Islamic Jihad, may be spoiled by a looming Israeli incursion in the Gaza Strip.
Well, Prime Minister Ehud Olmert last night issued a veiled but unmistakable warning to Hamas political leader Khalid Mashal in Damascus. Addressing the Jewish Agency Assembly, Olmert said Israel knows exactly where the top terror leaders are located and will target them wherever they are. If Gilad Shalit is not freed, the Prime Minister rejected the prospect of negotiating with the Palestinians over a prisoner swap and vowed that Israel would respond to the attacks from Gaza. Well, with IDF troops massing close to the border with Gaza, the big question now is what are the military options facing Israel and what are the limits of the Israeli army's formidable might? Joining us now from our Tel Aviv studio to help us answer those questions is Ron Ben Yishai, military analyst for Yediot Achronot. Ron, thank you so much for being our guest today.
Good evening, Leah.
Ron, do you think, first of all, as far as the critical question of Gilad Shalit is concerned, is a military rescue of Gilad Shalit a possibility in your view?
It is a possibility. There is not always, but there is a possibility, but I would not like to talk about it more than what I've just said.
Okay, well that sounds interesting, and of course I understand your position completely. Let me ask you this.
I hope you don't read too much in what
Okay.
I hope you don't read too much in what I said. I just said, but I said it is a possibility, knowing the circumstances on the ground, but I believe, like Ambassador Gillerman before me, that a diplomatic solution is much more preferable, and Israel would do its utmost to give a chance to the diplomatic and to the international and Israeli pressure to take effect.
Let me ask you this then, Ron. The army, as of course you know very well, is massing its forces on the border with Gaza. At the same time, we're saying to Hamas, give up our soldier. But do you think that the threat posed by the presence of all the tanks and the military might on the Gaza border may be sending a message to Hamas, this is what's going to happen to you after you give him up?
Not after, if you will not give him up.
And if they give him up, if they give up Gilad Shalit, do you think the army will then refrain from any punitive military action against the Palestinians?
Look, it is not the army who is restraining or losing the military action. It is the government, and I believe that it is my own opinion that if the Gilad Shalit will be released, then the military action is going to be much less of a threat than it is now.
We're hearing today that the army, the top brass in the army, is pressuring the defense minister and the government to launch a strike into Gaza. From your conversations with army officers, is this true? And do you think that it will, in fact, impact the decisions of the government?
Yes, the upper echelon of the army have come to the conclusion that the restraint Israel showed in the last, say, months concerning the Qassam rocket launching against the road, etc., caused Israel to lose its deterrence vis-à-vis the Palestinians. And they believe that Israel should restore the deterrence against the Palestinians, and therefore, if they don't stop immediately launching the Qassam rockets and making attempts to kidnap Israeli citizens and Israeli soldiers, then Israel has to strike militarily on the ground in the Gaza Strip. Yes.
Palestinian citizens and resistance fighters are preparing for possible Israeli aggression on the Gaza Strip. Dozens of resistance fighters blocked roads of refugee camps and main neighborhoods with sand piles.
بينما يستعد المواطنون لمواجهة العدوان الإسرائيلي الوشيك على قطاع غزة، أقام رجال المقاومة الأكياس الرملية في محاولة لتعطيل أي عملية اجتياح إسرائيلية. كما شكلت الأجنحة
Palestinian citizens are preparing for an imminent Israeli aggression on the Gaza Strip. Resistance fighters blocked main roads with sandbags in an attempt to delay a possible Israeli attack. The military wings of different Palestinian factions formed a joint command. Around the clock, bulldozers are putting piles of sand to block the streets that lead to the Palestinian Jabalia refugee camp north of Gaza near the Israeli borders. The Jabalia refugee camp looks ready for a battle with the Israeli occupation army. In addition to the piles of sand, many trenches were dug along the borders with Israel to prevent the Israeli army from entering. Dozens of resistance fighters are conducting military trainings in a mock battle with Israeli tanks attempting to invade residential neighborhood and refugee camps. Although the Palestinians have a few and simple weapons such as rifles and anti-armory vehicles, they have high morale to deter the possible Israeli aggression. They are not intimidated by the mobilization of massive Israeli military. They are determined to stand fast against any possible aggression and to defeat the occupation army. They also have a strong desire to retaliate against the Israeli massacres that have been committed against our people, including the massacre of the Ghalia family by Israeli shelling on the Gaza beach.
غالية التي قضت في قصف إسرائيلي على شاطئ غزة.
The echoes of the young girl Huda Ghalia are still heard loudly in the memory of Palestinians throughout the world.
As football fans across the globe were enjoying the World Cup yesterday, it was a different story for at least 20 Iraqis who were watching the event in a market square near Bakuba. They were killed. Among the victims of the explosions were children. Today, at least 3 people were killed and 10 wounded in a suicide car bomb attack at a petrol station used by Kirkuk municipal officials. The attack came days after Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki unveiled a national reconciliation plan aimed at tackling the Sunni Arab insurgency and easing sectarian tensions, which has received cold and warm responses from the different political divides. 22 Iraqis, including children, were killed when a motorbike bomb exploded in a market square where villagers were watching a World Cup football match yesterday. The booby-trapped motorcycle exploded in the midst of a crowd of youngsters packed into the square near Bakuba, northeast of Baghdad, to watch the Italy-Australia clash. About 40 people were also injured in the blast. At almost the same time as the market attack, a homemade bomb exploded in the main market in Hilla, south of Baghdad, killing 10 people and wounding at least 79. At least 11 other people were reported killed in shootings and bombings across Iraq. Hours later, Moscow confirmed the deaths of the 4 Baghdad embassy staff. An insurgent coalition led by Al-Qaeda has claimed responsibility for the killing of the men who were abducted on June 3rd in the West Baghdad neighborhood of Mansour. And a 5th diplomat died during the kidnapping. Gunmen also abducted 10 young men, all students from Sunni towns near Baghdad, from a building in the capital. And the US military confirmed 2 soldiers found dead south of Baghdad last week had been abducted and killed by guerrillas. Yesterday's violence came one day after Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki unveiled a national reconciliation plan aimed at stemming the bloodshed. Maliki's reconciliation plan came in from criticism from both sides of the sectarian divide on Monday, 24 hours after Parliament accepted the strategy, which is short on details. Iraq's most senior Sunni Arab politician, Vice President Tariq al-Hashimi, said the plan set no withdrawal date for US forces and that Maliki was wrong to rule out peace negotiations with followers of Saddam Hussein. In his 24-point plan presented to Parliament on Sunday, Maliki offered an olive branch to all who were ready to join the political process and said thousands who were not convicted of major crimes. Shiite clerics and militia leader Muqtada Sadr's movement welcomed the plan but opposed proposals to soften measures bearing Saddam's Ba'ath supporters from office.
خلف انفجار سيارة.
A car bomb in Kirkuk in northern Iraq targeted a crowded gas station in the city, killing and wounding many people and damaging parts of the station and nearby homes. More than 10 cars that were waiting to fill up on gasoline were set on fire by the explosion.
مرة أخرى
Once again, in Kirkuk, the smell of gasoline mixes with the smell of blood. This bloody incident resulted in the death and injury of many people, mainly civilians, who were waiting in line to fill their cars with gasoline at a gas station in a residential area in the center of the city. A booby-trapped car crashed into the long line of cars, exploding and setting on fire dozens of waiting vehicles, as well as damaging parts of the gas station and nearby homes.
وتدمر محتويات المحطة مع إحداث أضرار في المنازل المحيطة.
Brother, there was some crowding at the gas station because of the gasoline crisis. The government vehicles came and stopped vehicles from that side and this side of the street. For the past few days, they were giving us leaflets warning us of a possible attack. As soon as I came out of the administration building, there was an explosion. It was a massive explosion. The explosion came from that side. As a result, there were fires, explosions, shrapnel, body parts, and bodies on the road.
I wanted to enter. I reached there and the car was stopped over there. I think it was a Hyundai. I reached that area and was about to enter. Then all of a sudden everything went dark. There were explosions and loud sounds. The car started burning. I wanted to get out through the door, but the door was locked and wouldn't open. The fire was burning me, so I immediately broke the window and got out.
Iraqis say that they have become accustomed to wailing and crying in search of a way out of this painful reality. The armed operations have intensified in the city of Kirkuk in the past few days. Dozens of civilians and security forces have been killed. In addition, there have been kidnappings that threaten everyone in the city. Miserable living conditions also increase the suffering of the residents.
تزيد من معاناة السكان.
We were standing in front of the gas station. We were waiting for our turn to enter. Then we were surprised by a huge explosion. We didn't know where it came from. Look at what happened to us. Other people were killed. For how long do we have to suffer?
تصعيد العمليات يعني مزيدا من
The escalation in the armed operations means that there will be an increase in arrests and security plans, as well as an increase in confusion by the public in Kirkuk. The continuation of armed operations, despite the Iraqi Prime Minister's announcement of a new national reconciliation initiative, raises many questions and adds difficult obstacles in the way of political progress.
Syrian political blocs and parties organized several national events and celebrations to commemorate the 32nd anniversary of the liberation of the Syrian city of Quneitra, hoping that one day they will be able to liberate the Golan Heights from the Israeli occupation.
On June 26, 1974, the late Syrian President Hafez al-Assad raised the Syrian flag over the city's square in the heart of Quneitra. This news came after Syria liberated and took control of the city from the Israeli occupation. By raising the Syrian flag, Mr. al-Assad conveyed a message that the liberation of Quneitra will be followed by another victory, the liberation of the occupied Syrian Golan Heights.
The will of the people could not be undermined or defeated. Our nation comes first. We must continue preparations to drive out the enemy from every inch of our occupied land. I am very optimistic that Syria will prevail. I am very optimistic that the future will bring good news. There is no power in the world that can prevent us from reclaiming our national rights.
On this day, Syrians commemorate their great victory by organizing national events in the liberated areas. They also reflect on the magnitude and extent of damage and destruction caused by the Israeli invasion. During the war, Israel destroyed hundreds of surrounding towns and villages and took drastic measures against local residents in the Golan Heights. Israel wants to annex the Golan Heights to the Zionist entity.
During the war, the Israeli occupation forces destroyed the city's school, church, mosque, hospital, and many houses. At a meeting last month for the 100s group, Israel expressed that it wants the number of settlers in the Golan Heights to reach 50,000. Israel wants to annex the Golan Heights to its territories and separate it from Syria. However, Syria's position and the position of our people in the Golan Heights is clear. We want to combat these Israeli aggressive schemes and reclaim our land.
The anniversary of the liberation of Qnitra is not only a day to celebrate, but it is also a day to continue the struggle, especially considering that the Golan Heights is still under occupation and independence will not be complete without its liberation.
Substance and drug abuse among Algerian youth is not an easy habit to overcome. Overcoming an addiction is the most difficult part. However, if there is a will, there is a way to save drug victims from the slow death of substance abuse and drug addiction. Much effort was launched to help these youth overcome these addictive drugs. Dalila bin Aziz reports.
According to national and federal agency records, there has been an annual increase in the amount of hashish confiscated in the Algerian market. This represents a small percentage of drug consumed on the national average. Several factors have contributed to the widespread use and consumption of drugs among Algerian youth. Many addicted and misguided youth have transformed parts of their neighborhoods into underground centers for drug dealing purposes. The majority of the substance abuse victims have entered the dangerous world of drugs due to peer pressure.
I bought this rock for 20,000 Algerian dinars. This amount of hashish is worth 40,000 to 60,000 Algerian dinars. I roll the hashish in wrapping papers and smoke it. I started to use drugs in my neighborhood.
I use hashish and rock every day. I got addicted to drugs. Drugs are not good because they pose health risks.
I became addicted to drugs through peer pressure. I saw a lot of young people in my neighborhood using hashish, so I started smoking it as well.
Hashish is the most commonly used drug among Algerian youth. Smoking hashish is 4 times more dangerous than smoking cigarettes. It poses several health risks, including debilitating the kidney and the brain.
Substance users have a strong urge to smoke hashish and consume other drugs because they are addicted to it. They inhale hashish to get that temporary sensational feeling.
Once you become a drug user, you lose contact with your parents and loved ones. In fact, you become a different person. This is what the drugs, such as the blue rock, do to you.
The proceeding was a plea by Mohammed, a former drug user, to all youth in Algeria. Mohammed has become a role model, calling on all those who entered the dangerous world of drugs to bail out and seek help. In Algeria, under the banner Women and Political Participation, the International Women's Parliament Organization and International Conference for Female Parliamentarians is holding an international conference to support women's contributions in political life. Participating in the meeting that ends today are female parliamentarians and ambassadors from various Arab and foreign nations. They discussed a number of important topics aimed at finding the necessary mechanisms to raise the level of women's participation in government and decision-making positions.
The participants of this international conference included women ambassadors, parliamentarians, and government ministers from Europe and Arab nations. They discussed and analyzed the issue of women's participation in politics, as well as allowing them to reach decision-making positions. Participants also talked about the mechanisms that can be used to elevate their political status by expanding and supporting the presence of women in legislative and executive positions.
There were many mechanisms and initiatives presented to Arab parliaments to increase women's participation in politics. I think this is positive and encouraging, and that there will be progress in the future.
We need to increase these mechanisms, which we have been talking about for a long time. There needs to be strong will within parties as well as political will at higher levels of government, just like in other societies in other countries.
There seemed to be a consensus by the participants of this conference that the proportion of Arab women participating in politics is at the minimal level in comparison to their counterparts in the Western world, despite the many changes that have been made to laws as well as the doors that have opened to allow women to run in representative parliaments.
It is very important to raise the level of women's participation in parliament at the regional and municipal levels. In Sweden, we have worked for over 50 years to reach the highest proportion of women in parliament in the world.
However, there are material and other obstacles that prevent women from fully contributing. I think that these obstacles need to be removed because the abilities are there. After that, it will only be a matter of individual choices.
Algeria plays a leading role in empowering women in the Arab world by giving women important positions in governments and parliaments. Still, these achievements are controversial in the eyes of many women who continue to fight for equality in political participation.
In 1964, there were only 10 women in parliament. Today, in 2006, women's presence is still very weak in comparison to her presence in the fields of healthcare, social services, and education. But when it comes to politics, there is very little representation.
Political parties must put women on the top of political party lists so they will have tangible opportunities to fulfill political positions.
While many laws and constitutions in Arab countries, on paper, give women the same rights as men in political participation, in reality, Arab traditions and customs form major obstacles keeping women from reaching decision-making positions.
Two late goals from Patrick Vieira and Zinedine Zidane gave France a 3-1 win over Spain in the final second-round match in Hanover. Vieira headed in at the far post in the 83rd minute. French retiring superstar Zidane finished things off in style in stoppage time after a swift counter-attack. France came back from a goal down 4 minutes from the halftime. France now meet Brazil in the quarterfinals on Saturday, a repeat of the 1998 final won by the French. A moment of Ronaldo class and an Adriana goal helped to give Brazil a hard-fought 3-0 win over Ghana and secure a place in the quarterfinals. Ronaldo struck after 5 minutes, but Ghana piled under pressure and exposed the world champions' defense on several occasions before Adriana broke their hearts, if not their spirits, in first half injury time. And midfielder Zé Roberto added the third in the 84th minute, soon after the Ghanaian striker Asamo was sent off. The chief executive officer of Infront, the company that sells the global TV rights for the World Cup on behalf of FIFA, estimates that a cumulative audience of more than 30 billion is expected to view the World Cup finals and break records for the world's most watched sports event. Figures for the 2002 tournament in South Korea and Japan showed a total viewing figure of 28.8 billion. Russian referee Valentin Ivanov said the stormy match between Portugal and Netherlands was the most difficult of his professional career. Both teams finished the bad-tempered encounter 1-0 by Portugal with 9 men, while 8 others were cautioned through yellow cards. Ivanov was heavily criticized by players, coaches, and even FIFA President Sepp Blatter, who had said the referee could have given a yellow card to himself.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities. And the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs which connect you to the world.